switching over to the live view. Welcome everybody who's on. Thank you for the board members and the administration who were able to make the meeting. Obviously, this is unprecedented as we're doing this all virtually and doing the best we can in the COVID-19 with all the restrictions, but we'll forge ahead and do the best we can. Just to take care of a little housekeeping first, just for posterity, it is April 27th, 2020, 7:30. First, we're going to do a reorg meeting, which is some administrative tasks, and then we will very quickly get into the regular Board of Education meeting. So just bear with me. I have to read the Open Public Meeting Statement. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975 announcement, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the School District of the Chatham's Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted in the board administrative offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough, Chatham Township, Library of the Chatham, Chatham Courier Daily Record, and to amend that and now say attend electronically. For now, we're just going to go with it. Peter, would you mind taking roll call before we get started?
Sure, no problem. Mr. Guilfoyle.
Yeah, here.
Mr. Arnick.
Here.
Ms. Ciccarelli.
Here.
Ms. Ciccarelli. Ms. Clark.
Here.
Ms. Kenny.
Here.
Ms. Scott here. Mr. Ryan.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Valenti.
Here.
And Ms. Weber. 9 present and accounted for.
Here.
Just a reminder, everyone,
Excellent.
mute your mics if you're not talking. We're getting some feedback.
Thank you. And just to keep some sense of normalcy, could everyone join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go slightly out of order on the agenda because I would feel remiss in not mentioning, or at least certainly acknowledging, all the residents and the folks, family and friends that have maybe lost somebody to the virus or are still continuing to suffer. I also, that includes residents that we've lost. It's been all in the paper, so I don't want to break any privacies, but we've lost residents in town, both in the borough and in the township. So our hearts go out to all of our friends and family that are still suffering and probably will continue to suffer. And again, I have to, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to our administration and our teachers. I don't know that you've ever worked so hard in your lives. I know you didn't sign up for this as teachers, and virtual teaching is not what you signed up for. And you're doing the best you can, and we certainly appreciate it. I've talked to several teachers in other districts and ours, and particularly at the younger grades, they're probably working 10 times harder than they had ever. It was hard enough to begin with, and Michelle can talk to it. It's even harder now. And you don't get that interaction with the students that I know that you thrive off of. So thank you for everything you're doing. It is acknowledged. We know how hard you're working. Please hang in there, and we will get to the end of this together. But I just want to thank you all from the entire board. Thank you for how hard you're working, and we really appreciate it. And certainly the parents and the students, thank you to you as well. You've been very patient. Again, this is not a perfect world, but as Mike had said, we're not going to let perfect be the enemy of good. So we will continue to adjust and make changes as we can, and Mike will talk about that in a little bit. So I just want to move up my president's comments because I felt it was necessary to just address, what we're all dealing with and going through. And again, we thank you for your patience, and our hearts and prayers are with those that are still suffering and family members that have been lost. So moving right along, we have a little bit of very quickly to get through some reorganization business first. And just for the sake of time, I was going to move the items in the reorg meeting. So I'm going to make a motion to move annual appointments A1 through 18 in the reorganization meeting.
I'll second everything on this.
Thank you, Matt. So again, these are, just reappointing attorneys, auditing firms. It's a lot of architect firms, so mostly housekeeping. There's nothing unusual on this particular section. So Peter, I'm just going to do is it easier to do all those in favor?
If
Raise your
you
hand.
want, as long as everybody, and I'll scroll and everybody does the hand, and they'll just confirm it verbally that we have a 9-0 vote or a whatever number vote is fine with me.
I'm just
Okay.
glad you dressed up today, Pete.
So all those,
Hey, I want to confuse the public.
Well done.
everyone is good with
We're
all
gonna do
the A1 through A18?
Yes.
Any abstentions? Anybody opposed? Excellent. Go ahead, Peter. Call it out.
I'm going to say that A1 to 18 passes 9-0. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, the second motion is B1 through B32, which are annual motions and designations, parliamentary procedures, purchasing manuals, school signatures, different bank accounts. Matt, can you second that?
Yeah, sure. Second.
Thank you. If nobody has any additional questions on that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Nope. Peter, go
We're
ahead.
going to go to duly noted B1 through B32 passes 9-0.
Excellent. Thank you. And the last item is standing committees. It's just C1, and it's just the committees that we've all been assigned to since January. So all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Sorry. Excellent.
Duly noted that
Okay, excellent.
C1
Thank you.
passes 9-0. And now, Jill, you're ready for the regular meeting, for the regular section of the meeting.
Excellent. Okay. Great. Thank you, Peter. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there with us. So I've already had my president's comments because I went out of order. I didn't want to just jump right into the reorg meeting without some acknowledgement of what's going on. So we're going to move right on ahead. Dr. LaSousa, I'm going to pass the microphone over to you for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. I will pick up on your comments where you left off. When we last were together, it was March 16th, and we were all in the high school media center. So it's pretty hard to believe that we're all the way at the end of April already. But like you said, I'd like to extend my sympathies and also my thoughts and prayers to anyone in our school community who has been directly affected by COVID-19. We've had 7 staff members so far who fell ill. They've all recovered from what we've been told. Most of them, all but one, I think, were able to work through their sickness and keep the wheels turning in whatever role they have in the district. So we're appreciative of that. We've also had numerous students, certainly into the double digits, though we don't have an exact count because those numbers or those illnesses are not reported to us directly by the health department. But we have had numerous students fall ill. We believe they all are doing well as well. And of course, we know of parents who either have been ill or continue to be sick with COVID, and we extend our thoughts and our best wishes to them. And naturally, like you said, we know of a number of staff members who've lost loved ones and folks in the community who have passed as well. So that's first and foremost in terms of our concerns and our thoughts. Next, I just want to comment on the closure itself and what we've all been thinking or hoping to hear from the governor in terms of things getting to a point where we can expect to reopen or at least understand what the timetable might look like. As you probably know from the announcements today, we don't really have a set time frame yet. So we have a lot of unanswered questions still. And of course, they deal with items like graduation and end of year ceremonies and what may be possible, what may not be possible. Hopefully the picture will be different by the middle of June, and we'll have more flexibility in terms of how we celebrate our seniors and other students. We also don't have any answers yet about extended school year, which is something that is right at the top of the list. And then whether we are returning to school this year or in the fall, we will need to work through and get a lot of very specific guidance from our Department of Health or departments of health about social distancing matters, protective gear. It's obviously not realistic to think that first and second graders are going to be able to wear masks to school. And our schools are not set up to enable us to have 6 feet apart from our students. So there are a whole lot of questions, and we're still waiting for those answers. And we remain in contact with our county and other officials in the state and our various organizations, trying to make sure that everything we want to be on their radar screen is on their radar screen, and we're able to get the answers that we need as soon as we can. And then finally, like you, I just want to say thank you to all the parents who have sent messages of support and encouragement. Many of them have reached out to try to help other families in the community who are in tough straits right now. And we've been working with some of those parents to try to do things like provide food assistance for those families who might be food insecure. We recognize, as I've said many times, that this is not perfect. We are trying to get better every week that goes by. Ms. Chase and I are in very close contact with our principals and our supervisors who are working side by side, the teachers, virtually speaking, of course. We know that there's an appetite for more live lessons with whole classes coming together. We are trying to be very thoughtful and deliberate about that. I have my own reservations about whether that's really the most effective way to deliver instruction to students for a variety of reasons. But we've increased the amount of video and other video conferencing types of opportunities we're providing students. And we're continuing to go down that path of trying to be thoughtful and deliberate with how we provide meaningful instruction and meaningful learning opportunities to students as best we can in this environment. And that's, I think, the broad brushes from my superintendent's report at this point, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Are the superintendents in contact with the governor's office, or it's still too soon? Is there a mechanism in place for you to communicate, a two-way communication?
We're not in contact with the governor's office per se. Our county operates a weekly meeting, and our county superintendent then is in contact with the Department of Education and the Commissioner of Education. We, of course, as you all know, are part of the Garden State Coalition of Schools, one of the charter members, and that organization, its executive director, is in close contact with a number of legislators. I know Mila JC just reached out last week for some input on a couple of pieces of legislation that might work their way through the Assembly or Senate in May. And then just in ad hoc fashion, there are superintendents communicating with the Commissioner of Education and trying to send messages that we think critical to the powers that be.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then, Peter, we're going to move over to the administrator report on construction and the meals.
Sure. On the construction, the middle school auditorium is pending a few of the final inspections. And the one item that they were trying to schedule the contractor to complete was the installation of the railings up in the balcony. So once I guess everybody gains a little more comfort with the quarantine and social distancing, that will be continued. That will continue and be finalized. So we were very close, and then had to take a halt in all activity due to the COVID restrictions. The district is offering the 60 plus children that are on the free and reduced lunch every day. So far, we've been distributing up to 30 lunches a day. I do want to give a shout out to Joanne Carroll for helping to organize the Helping Hands, which has been started last week, collecting money from Chatham residents, or I guess from anyone, to provide meals to the families that need some help, on weekends or other time. Starting next week, we're putting a plan in place to distribute $25 ShopRite gift cards to each of the free and reduced students. And Joanne did note, which we'll be sending a flyer out as well, that once, if there's any extra, any family in Chatham in need, can sign up to receive these as well. She hopes to continue to fundraise to make this program available on a weekly basis all the way up to the end of June. So I think, she's pretty amazing for getting this started and, getting this organization, and she was mirroring off of what's being done in Madison. So I think that's, we have some, it's been said before, but we have some pretty incredible people in Chatham that, when the chips are down, they make sure to, go out and help all of their neighbors and fellow residents. So it's kind of nice to see and nice to watch. That's all I have, unless anybody has any questions.
I don't have any questions. I'll pause a moment in case anybody else does. No. Okay, great. We look good. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate that. Thank you for the update. Thank you, Joanne, for stepping up. And it is amazing. In town, people do step up when things need to get done. Moving over to committee reports, personnel. Anne, we're going to start with you.
Yes, I'd like to move action items A1 to A23 on the regular agenda.
Okay, sorry. We're just going to go through. Has the personnel committee met since?
Oh, sorry, never mind.
Last time
we met 2 weeks ago. Is that correct, Beth? I can't keep the date straight, but yes, we did meet 2 weeks ago and just talked about, making sure that we're going to have full staffing for the fall and any other openings that we had.
Okay, great. And we're in good shape there, right? Moving along on the staffing front.
Mike, yes, correct.
Yes, we've been, as you'll see on the agenda, we've received a number of resignations, retirements, staffing changes, and we are doing our best to fill those vacancies, doing things just like we're doing here, Google Meets and Zoom and so forth. Beth has been kind of on the receiving end from all of the principals and supervisors as we've secured replacements for staff members who are exiting. And on the agenda, you'll see a number of appointments for people to fill vacancies that we currently have.
Are there any areas of concern right now, Mike? Typically, you mentioned the sciences and the world languages. Is there any beyond those tough areas?
We have not had any problems yet. It's still early. I have heard from other districts who have run into troubles with folks getting their certifications for the first time and fingerprinting and all of that. I think all of that is slowed up right now. The candidates we've had in the pipeline, though, have had most of their paperwork in hand. Beth can correct me if I'm wrong, and we haven't really run into any obstacles yet.
Okay, great. So just keep us posted on that. I imagine there'll be some roadblocks along the way, but thank you for forging ahead. Thank you, Beth, for continuing to filling those staffing needs early in the pipeline. So, we kind of get the cream of the crop. Moving over to curriculum, Mrs. Kenny.
Yes, curriculum met a couple of weeks ago.
We'll go to finance.
Oh, can you hear me or no? Hello?
Yes.
Curriculum met also a couple of weeks ago. We talked about the 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C., and the administration came up with an alternative plan to have the trip that was currently scheduled for early June to be rescheduled for middle of October. when the kids will be in high school, but everyone still felt that it was an important trip, that if possible, they would still, the trip would still be able to be run in October with the 8th grade administrators taking the 9th graders. And those that aren't able to attend, they'll be able to get a refund for a certain portion. I believe it was 75% of the cost of the trip. And lastly, they have the third option of transferring getting a credit to transfer to another family member or student as part of the. So those are the 3 different options. We also just went a review of how the online learning was taking place, and some of the struggles, especially at the very young grades of K to 3, in terms of attention span for some of these younger students to be engaged in this environment. And so, similar to some of the things that were discussed earlier, trying to figure out the best way to keep these students engaged. And I think those were the main points. Am I missing anything, Mike? And Karen?
I don't think so.
So then that was it.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you, Lotta. Finance and Facilities, Mr. Gilfillan.
Yeah, we met on April the 13th. The main budget topics were the budget for 2020, 2021, which we can go through when we get to the action items in terms of what our final figures were. We spent a lot of time in terms of what the potential is for refunds in a number of different areas. For example, first student subscription bus refunds, reduction of aid and lieu payments, full day kindergarten refunds, some salary pay for maybe potentially for the spring coaches. Basically, we're at the point right now, we just don't know where we're going to be by the end of June as to what the final consumption is going to be or the final usage. So we kind of kicked that can down the road in terms of deciding what those potential pay jacks can be at the end of the year, but they're definitely under consideration. We talked about what the horizon looks like, and what could our potential state aid look like in fiscal year 2000, fiscal year 2021. If anyone, I don't know if anyone was around for the last disaster of 08-09, but we saw a significant reduction in state aid, which I've not seen much yet in terms of discussion and or kind of banter from the state, but you know, the guess and the educated guess would be right now that we're going to see some form of state aid reduction. So Mike and the staff have been already trying to make sure and figure out how we're going to be able to manage that and how can we continue to give our kids the best possible education. Again, we don't know, that's pure speculation, but if history serves to repeat itself, we probably will have to deal with some of that. You will see on the regular agenda tonight something coming out of Trenton, which is referred to as A3902, which allows some of the municipalities to withhold or delay payments to the school districts. Something we don't hope will have to happen. We're hoping that Chatham is one of the few towns that actually can get through this without much destruction of for the finances of our taxpayers and constituents. But it's something. Actually, when we get to the regular agenda, I actually forget whether or not this passed or not, but it's something that we needed to think about. The referendum was also in discussion. Basically, we're at the point right now, we really can't even think about this referendum for another year. And then we looked at basically the staffing figures, what our breakage numbers are going to be, and how that money is going to be allocated. And again, what else do we need to potentially save some money to deal with altering finances that could potentially come down the pike. Don't forget on the regular agenda, 2 issues to talk about. One is what's going to be the final budget number. And then second, we can have a short discussion on this A3902 at that point, just to decide whether or not people have questions, or B, might just clarify at that point if it was passed and if, you know, where we think we stand with the town on that at that moment, or at this moment. And that's it.
Great.
and the
Thanks,
hope and
Matt.
pray.
Then we'll talk about, yeah, from your lips. We'll talk a little bit more on some of the budget items in that portion of the meeting. Mr. Ryan, moving over to you for policy and planning.
Yes, thank you. The last policy meeting was canceled or rescheduled, so we haven't met in the last two Board of Ed meetings. Dr. LaSousa, can you let us know when the next meeting is for policy?
I will look at that and get an email to all of you guys.
Thank you. So nothing to report from policy.
Excellent. And I just want to point out that Mr. Ryan did not break the stay-at-home orders. He was able to cut his own hair, and it looks professionally done. So I don't want anybody writing in the letter saying, how did he get his hair cut? Either he does a great job or he's lying and Kathleen actually did it. But I like your haircut. Well done.
Grease is the word.
Liaison reports. I do not have anything. That's right. A liaison report from the borough. We're just keeping an eye on, as I had mentioned, payment. And my understanding that A3902, we will receive the portion, if they collect 99% of their taxes, we will get 99% of payment. So hopefully that won't be a problem. Michelle, is there anything from the township to report?
There was nothing from the township, just echoing what you're saying.
And it seems that both the township and the borough are increasing their taxes to cover a myriad of expenses, virus related and unrelated. So there's nothing from the athletic boosters since we haven't been in school in a while. Performing arts is the same. The auditorium's almost ready to go, but we can't use it. Chatham Education Foundation, Lotta, anything? Yes, no?
No, nothing to report at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Matt, I'm assuming nothing from recreation as well. Okay, thank you. He's shaking his head no. And district cabinet
Nothing.
has not met because we can't get into any of the schools. Great, thank you.
Jill, if I could just,
Okay, so then moving
Jill-
along, I'm just going to make a motion to pass. Oh. Go,
yeah,
Peter.
Jill, I was just going to interject for Lotta that the Chatham Ed Foundation has been busy. You'll notice on B9 of the agenda that they donated a little over $1,700 in 3D printing supplies. And kudos has to go to Danielle DeGunis and some of the STEM teachers who've taken home the 3D printers, and they are printing masks and face shields and different parts for respirators and donating them. So they are, doing some pretty good stuff. So they're giving masks and shields to the medical personnel. So we thank the CEF in advance for that. Matt, sorry to steal your thunder when you do the motions, but I didn't want to let the CEF go unnoticed.
Thank you, Peter. Matt would have been all over that. And I'm hoping to see
All over.
the press pick up that story. It's been incredible how much they've done, how much masks, face shields they've made to date. So I'm hoping the press will pick that press release up. So I'm going to I make a motion to move the minutes from March 16th, both the public and the executive session. And I believe, Peter, is Lotta, were you not present? I think Lotta was the only one not present.
Lotta and Brad. Lotta and Brad, everybody else was there.
Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Mentions? Lotta and Brad are going to abstain.
Was that really a month ago?
Anybody
Duly
opposed?
noted that the minutes passed 702 with Lotta or Ms. Kenny and Mr. Smith as the abstention.
Excellent. Thank you. So now we have our first opportunity for comment. And I did receive an email from Mr. Paul Craig at 91 Myersville Road that he asked to have his email read into the record. And I have not received any additional emails since. So this is from Mr. Paul Craig at 91 Myersville Road. Relative to student activity fees at Chatham High School, I am concerned that the fees appear to be commingled with general funds. I would like to understand how many of the activities that incur a fee incur costs per pupil lower than the standard fee. In other words, do some activities subsidize other activities? I am surprised that the same fee is charged for people on the football team versus the book club, German club, etc. While I understand that students frequently participate in multiple activities, I think it's quite possible that a small percentage of students realize the entire subsidy from our taxes. The football team, the ice hockey team, etc., and other students, the book club, the film criticism club, etc., are paying more than the cost of their activities. Further transparency on distribution of fees collected and disbursement of expenses on the associated activities would be appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Craig. We will talk about that when we get to the budget items. I also I ran into Mr. Heap, and he had just asked a question about postponing if we're going to go forward with the referendum and where that stood. I had let him know that we look forward to seeing him on this meeting, but he claimed he had a flip phone and could not attend. But I did tell him that the referendum was being postponed. I also heard from Mrs. Fran Drew, who also had questions on the referendum specific to the state portion, the state funded portion of the program, the projects that we were considering, and what our timeline was. I had also told Mrs. Drew that we were not moving forward for at least a year, and that we would have to relook at all the projects again to make sure that the state funding is still available and, double check the priorities. Again, we don't really know what next year will look like given our own state aid and how things will fall out. So those are the comments that I had. Mike, did you receive any additional emails for initial public commentary? I do not have any more in my inbox.
I do not either.
Okay, great. Then I'm gonna close public commentary, and then we can maybe answer those questions. Mr. Gilfillan, do you think it's best to address the fee conversation now or wait until we get into the budget items? We've talked about fees extensively before, and it's a bit of a balancing act on the best way to collect fees, and it does go into the general. Just to be clear, Mr. Craig's question is, does it go into the general funds? And the answer to that is yes. And the fee started, I think, about 10 or 11 years ago. And it was a way to offset just the increasing budget that we were facing with limited aid. So it wasn't a direct pay to play, but it was a way to put some of the costs back on the activities. But Mr. Gilfillan, you're much closer to this, so I'm going to pass it over to you to maybe elaborate on.
This has been something that we've dealt with for years, and we've always decided that no matter how many clubs or sports you play, that we had a set fee. And basically the balance was that there was ever an issue from a financial perspective as to an inability to pay this, is that at the discretion of the administration, we would waive that fee. So I'm not really quite sure what more to add to that, but it's just been it's been a district policy for as long as I can remember.
Mrs. Weber?
Michelle, did you want to, I know you had some strong feelings. Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No. Joe? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Michelle.
Okay. I reached out last week. Just I know I sound like a broken record year after year when this comes up about the fees at the high school. I think now more than ever, I want the ability for families to access assistance to be in bold print, not fine print, and that families should have the ability to discreetly request a waiver or assistance when it comes to financially paying these, especially families that have multiple students at Chatham High School. I think many families in Chatham right now are in financial situations they did not anticipate being in. And these fees are due
typically August, September, when families are going back to school is expensive regardless. And, you know, if you have 3 kids at the high school, it could be a hefty fee. I would ask the finance committee, could you possibly consider maybe doing a sibling factor? If a family has more than 1 or 3 kids at the high school, maybe pay $150 for one and a reduced fee for the other 2, and maybe examine what the financial impact would be, you know, as a result of that. I know these decisions can't be made now. I've talked to Dr. LaSousa. He said, you know, tracking could be difficult, but I have to believe we have enough technology and software in place to be able to track something like that. And I don't know how many people it actually impact, but I just want to make sure there is flexibility for families that are in situations that they didn't anticipate being in, have multiple kids at Chatham High School who participate and can get the help they need. Thank you.
I can't disagree with you, Michelle. My opinion would be that every single situation is going to have to be evaluated. No matter if you have 1 kid or if you have 5 kids, it's just going to have to be done on a case-by-case situation. And so we're going to have to be there as best we can for everybody through this whole process. So,
Ms. Weber, Mr. Gilfillan, Mr. LaSousa, this is Sal. Can I weigh in on the public comment and add a few thoughts from some constituents and parents that I've spoken to over the last few weeks?
please.
It's in a different topic, so if you want to still stay on the topic you're on, I'll wait.
Do you want to put that into board business, Jill, or do you want to do that now?
We can move it to the board business and talk about it because I want to make sure Sal gets his thoughts out. We could also, Matt, we can pass it now, but readjust it over the summer, correct?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Well, I don't think we know really, you know, we can, the
Okay,
fee
Sal,
itself is one thing.
floor
The
is
fee itself is one thing. It's the discretion of the administration to waive that fee and or adjust it. That I believe is in place. And, you know, we're gonna have to leave it up to the administration at that point to look at each individual situation on its own, decide the merits and make the adjustments accordingly.
Can I weigh in on that for a second? I think what Mr. Krieg is saying that, you know, yes, of course, we could all agree that the fees need to be adjusted based on needs of families, et cetera. I think that's clearly the case. But I think what the question was trying to address was potential inequities in the fee, meaning, you know, one group of athletes or club members get more out of the fee than others do. And I think that's potentially a logistical nightmare to try to manage, but I don't know if we even want to discuss, those issues in finance or not.
We've looked at it and discussed it in the past, and the issues always come up is it's very rare that someone does just one thing during the year. There's multiple clubs and other things that factor in that sometimes people don't understand are, in essence, a part of the fee. There's very few people that we can honestly peel off and say they do one thing. And you talk about logistical nightmare, trying to do it based upon individual club. Then you could have one kid, we looked at doing it $50 a club, right? You could have one person who's 50, another person who's 700. That's where everything just comes in to be such a mess as we went with that flat fee. Which we always found that almost everybody in the school does multiple different things. And so we just the figure was fair. And we always did discuss that if there was years when we had flex and there was in good times that we could reduce it. But I just think now I don't think the issue is going to be the 150. I think it's just going to be the amount of additional requests for support, which we have to be there for as best possible.
Sure.
Absolutely. Okay, closing out the fee topic, I'm going to pass it back over to Sal for additional comments on public commentary that you've heard.
Great, and thank you. And I'm going to keep it quick. I know different school districts nearby, neighboring school districts all over the state have been handling this online learning experience in different ways. And it's been incredible what our administration and teachers have done, and they deserve a lot. You can't please everybody, and it's never going to be a perfect experience no matter what school district you are in. Some people are going to be disadvantaged by the way it's happening, and some people are not. So there's been some concerns that our school district should engage in more interactive type learning, more online classes. You know, there's some districts that have 9 to 2 or 10 to 3, and you know, you literally have a bunch of kids in a Zoom classroom, and that may not work great, and I'm sure that has issues. But there's some parents who are questioning that you could have 2 kids in a math class with 2 different teachers in Chatham, and one of those teachers has a very hands-off approach, study these YouTube lessons, and we'll talk about it in an online chat later this week. And the other session might have a much more interactive experience, and the inequity in that, and that in general, more interactive learning is better for the kids. And then my last comment will be, whatever our feelings are regarding interactive learning and whether it's better for the general population, I would just like the administration, and this is from me, to pay particular attention to special needs students, because their worlds are impacted perhaps a little bit more strongly than the general population. And the only type of social interaction they've often had is during the school year in their classes, with their aides, with their classmates, with their teachers. And to have that, well, I just would like to know that the administration is paying particular attention and addressing that community. Thank you. I'll keep quiet now.
No, thank you, Sal. I appreciate it. We've heard, you know, folks on both sides of that coin, and as Dr. LaSousa mentioned in his weekly newsletter, that, you know, some people want more video time and some people can't possibly handle that given their own home environment. I don't know if Mike or Dr. LaSousa, if you wanted to touch on that, or if you want to leave it as said in your letter.
Sure. No, absolutely. I appreciate the comments, Sal. And to work backwards, absolutely, we have a focus on students who need the most support. We've been probably a little bit more proactive than most, I'd say, in making sure mental health resources are available to students and families. And that's just one type of support. There are other learning supports that we know are crucial, and that we have some students who are in need of greater support than others. So we absolutely are on the same page. In terms of the interactivity or the live lessons, if you will, so of course I agree that interactivity is important. Kids need to be socializing now with each other and with positive adult role models in their lives. And we always are looking at, whether we're in school or closed or whatever, the consistencies across teachers, especially teachers that teach the same course. This is not a new issue for us. This is one that is always present, and we're always looking grades K through 12 about comparisons between teachers, about whether we're delivering instruction in the same ways, adhering to the curriculum, and so forth. In terms of this issue, though, of live lessons, so I think there are two things here. The first is that when I first communicated to our administrative team in January about possibly closing schools, and I did it the week that Hong Kong announced it was going to be closed for 6 weeks, we met and I directed them that the guiding principle for us was going to be flexibility. Because we didn't know how many of our staff were going to fall ill. We didn't know how many of our students were going to fall ill. We didn't know what would be happening in each home of the 4,000 students that we have. So I have deliberately designed what we're doing err on the side of flexibility as opposed to the side of structure. And I understand not everyone has done that. There are pluses and minuses to both ways. I've spoken with superintendents who are doing it differently, some who are doing it similarly. The other issue, though, is really about what is optimal instructional delivery in this environment that we're in right now. And for those of us who have spent hundreds or thousands of hours inside of classrooms, watching teachers, looking at what is effective instruction, what are the components of lessons, what you find is even in an ideal world, and we are as close to ideal as we can get in some of our classrooms in Chatham, you have a teacher that is focusing on teaching points. They are managing student behavior, 20 to 25 students in the room. They're gauging how focused or how attuned each student is to the lesson at hand. They break the lesson into smaller component parts so that they can group students together. Certain students can work with one another. The teacher can work with a group of students in a sustained manner. The teacher is differentiating. The teacher is walking up and down the classroom to look at what teachers are writing down and check on their understanding. All of that really isn't possible when we're in a Zoom or a Google Meet like we are right now. And what I feel like I'm arriving at, even though we're doing some of that in the district, and even though we're experimenting with all kinds of methodologies, is that we need short, bursts of instruction, either in video or if it's live, recorded, so that the students who are unable to be there can then go back and see it, just like they would a YouTube lesson or a Khan Academy lesson. Then we have to do a lot of checking for understanding, follow-up, feedback, students socializing with one another in smaller groups. One of the hallmarks of good instruction is breaking your classroom down into smaller groups so that you can differentiate the learning and assess students at a closer level. So we're trying to provide that, but it is different at different grade levels, and it leads to a lot of even longer discussions than I should be engaging in right now about what works best. And what we're doing now is really trying to listen to our teachers, listen to what they're saying about what is working and what's not working, how their students are progressing. And we have a whole range. We have kids who basically aren't logging in and we don't know what's going on. And then we call home after a few days and we find out they were sick or there was some other issue at home. We have other students and parents who are hungry for much, much more and would like to be plugged in for 5 hours a day. So we're trying to strike the balance of sound instructional practices and meeting the needs of as many learners as we can. And we'll keep on working to get better. I wouldn't tell you that if we're still out 5 weeks from now, we're going to be doing exactly what we're doing today. We're continually evaluating what we're doing to try to improve what's taking place. So I just wanted to kind of respond that way initially, but I appreciate the comments and understand exactly where you and the others are coming from.
Michael, that was a very thoughtful answer, so thank you. And I'm glad whoever's listening to this simulcast, I hope they heard it. It's all gray, so thank you.
Jill, can I just make a comment to that now so we can move on to other things later? It's Michelle. One thing I would caution is when we look at how we want to, and we're going to be constantly looking at this model for distance learning and see how we can strengthen it and change it and best reach the needs of all the learners in Chatham. I really ask the administration to really consider quality over quantity, quality experiences and quality lessons for students versus a live meet every day, just because, it's important, people feel that we need to have this live instruction where it might even be more meaningful if once a week, a small group, that student has access to a teacher versus, everyday live, where it's just keep quality over quantity if you can. And I'm sure we are already, but sometimes that can get lost in this platform of learning.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Any other board members want to mention anything about public commentary or anything you're hearing that you want to bring to our attention before we move on to the regular agenda? Trying to look at all the squares. Okay.
I don't see
Okay, very
anybody,
good.
so I can't tell
There'll
you.
be another opportunity for public commentary if any. We see you, Matt. You're looking a little scary, like The Shining. Your angle is a little frightening.
Oh, God. His hair is just a
We're
disaster.
going to move on to talk to Mike Ryan. He's got skills.
Really? Maybe,
They're
maybe,
Over to Mrs. He could probably raise enough money to cover the fees with haircuts for you guys. Oh, and we're going to move it over to personnel. Do you mind moving personnel?
I don't mind. Once again, I'll move action items A1 to A23 on the regular agenda.
And I'll second them just for ease.
Thank you.
We have a couple of retirements. I'm always jealous of those. Dr. Holzer and Mrs. Raffo are retiring. God bless them. They've spent a lot of time here. We thank them for their service. I don't know if Mike wanted to add, but I'm always just green with envy every time there's a retirement on the agenda.
Just that Randy is one of the friendliest faces at Lafayette Avenue School. All of your students have had her, all of your kids have had her as they've gone through Lafayette. And Missy Holzer is the teacher who's been to outer space and to core drilling in Antarctica and all over every continent and practically country on Earth. So we wish them the best and thank them for everything they've done for their students.
Does anybody else have any additional questions or comments on any of the personnel? And Ms. Grant, thank you very much for working through all the staffing. I see there's a lot of appointments, which is great. I know it's a difficult task in a perfect world. Doing it virtually is probably, again, 10 times harder. So thank you for keeping Chatham at the top of the list here. Again, Peter, I'm just going to do it roll call, or not a roll call. So all those in favor of items A1 through A23?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Duly noted, A1 to A23 passes 9-0. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving on to finance and facilities, Mr. Gilfillan.
Yeah, Pete, I cannot tell. I'm looking at a preliminary agenda, so I've got B1 through what?
16.
1 through 16.
And then scroll.
Yeah, some of mine don't have numbers on them.
1 to 16, Matt.
Yeah, some of mine don't have numbers on them. I said what the final number count was. Move action items B1 through 16 on the regular agenda. Jill, second.
Second.
Okay, a couple things to talk about. One, again, it's another Girl Scouts Silver Award donations. They raised $895 to purchase some stuff for the preschool playground areas. And then the two items of importance on here is the approval of the budget for 2021 for the school districts of the Chathams. Again, we have the taxing authority of 2%. Final budget figures, they'll eventually be preliminary based upon what the final state numbers will be, is $77,200,650. We could talk about that. And then also on there is something that we have done in the past. We've always not had 100% support from the board, but we did put in essence, what will be considered kind of a support statement from the school district of the Chathams Board of Education, urging the state senate and the governor to oppose A3902, as we discussed before. Based upon this, unless something's changed, and I got this last agenda, it is still just a pending bill. I don't believe it had the support of Sweeney. Last I read, I could be wrong on that. But again, all we're doing is just basically coming out as a board, and you can support this or not support this, and supporting, like I said, I'm not supporting that A3902 bill. Mike, did I explain that correctly?
Yes, I'll just mention A 3902 did have Senator Sweeney's amendments added to it. It's been held up from what we understand, so it's still out there pending. And the current time, the law requires that if tax collections fall short, the municipality then takes out a short-term note to fund the units of government that would receive the tax collections. So they are the county, the library, the school district. This bill alters that from that responsibility from the municipality to the school districts in the cases in which school districts would be short their tax collections that the municipalities collect. And the reason that all the education organizations are opposing that is that right now there are very strict procedures for a school district to take out any kind of loan, and that's the referendum process. A school district, a board of education cannot simply float a note or go out to bond whenever it wants. It can only present a question to the voters, and only if the majority of the voters approve the question can the school district borrow any money. So this would change that, and the professional organizations, educational organizations in New Jersey believe that the law should remain as it is, with municipalities holding the responsibility for securing any kind of loans to patch through a period in which the tax collections fall short.
Excellent. Any other comments on the budget? And just to remind folks, it's the budget, the budget that we're approving is 1.98% increase. And that has changed since the March 16th meeting. And if folks want to see more detail, if they go to the March 16th meeting, you'll see the entire budget presentation. And it has not changed since that. We've not changed the percentage of increase from 1.98. Any other questions on finance? Okay. All those in favor? That's B1 through B16.
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, duly noted that B1 through 16 passes 9-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving over to curriculum, Mrs. Kenny?
Yes, I would like to move action on items C1 to C2 for vote.
I
I'll second it.
Take your pick, Peter.
Oh. You're going to do the, okay.
Okay, we can't have any discussion on it. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? And abstentions? And folks, both of those items, you don't have the agenda in front of you, are both harassment, intimidation.
Duly
reports, so
noted.
we can't comment on those publicly.
Agenda items C1 and C2 passed 9-0. Thank you.
Excellent. Policy, we have none unless Mr. Ryan's going to call an audible. No audible. Okay, great. Excellent. We have our, we're going to go into board business now. Just a quick question, Mike LaSousa, on calendars. Do we, I know our world is upside down right now. Do we have to make any decisions quickly on what the calendar will look like for the following year?
For the following year, we don't need to make any decisions quickly. For this year, once we understand what the rest of this year entails, then you will have to make a decision about snow days and when to use them, either by removing 3 days from the end of this school year to end the school year 3 days earlier, or by doing what we've always done, which is put them around Memorial Day weekend. And that assumes that we would be out the full year. If we're not out the full year, then we'll burn the snow days before we come back into physical session.
Okay, I think folks might want to continue to have a day off, an extra day off Memorial Day weekend. I don't know what that's going to look like. I know, May 15th, they're starting to talk about loosening things. Without a crystal ball, it's hard to know. Is there a time frame? Do we have to do that by next meeting? Is that the goal?
We would need to do it by next meeting. So the hope would be that by next meeting, which I think is the 11th, if memory serves, we'd have some indication from the governor about what the rest of this school year will be.
Okay, so that other thing I just want to acknowledge is that graduation, we know we feel awful for the seniors. It's just unfortunate. We just don't have any answers for them at this time. It really depends on if we get back to school, right, Mike? If we get back in session, that's one set of decisions. And then if there's no session, what, if anything, can we do to acknowledge this milestone? But we do acknowledge that the seniors are particularly impacted, proms and sports seasons and the play that I'm sure would have been spectacular, as well as a culmination of graduation.
Yes, so there's definitely the possibility, and again, this is just pure speculation, but if schools were to remain closed right through the end of this year, but by June, some of these social distancing rules were relaxed and we could gather in large groups as long as 6 feet of space was maintained between everyone, that we could have some type of ceremony with students outdoors, for example, on a field with, seats 10 feet apart from one another, or a smaller audience, only the parents. Again, I'm just kind of thinking out loud right now, or relaying some of the out loud thinking that we've been doing. So I wouldn't say that if schools remain closed for the rest of this year, that automatically means that there's nothing to consider for graduation except some kind of car ceremony, or a later graduation date in July or August. We could do something creative if we have new rules that we're living by at that point and have more flexibility in what we might be able to entertain.
Okay, hopefully we'll know a little bit more May 11th. We have 2 meetings in May or just 1?
I believe we have only 1 in May and then 2 in June, but we had spoken, at least you and I think maybe had spoken, that if we're still in this kind of environment, we'd reduce the 1 in June. We changed June to just 1 meeting because we don't have the same presentations and other types of items that we normally might have in June.
Mike, as of right now, we're slated for
we have to have 2
May
because there's
11th and
much
June
to talk about.
15th.
Well, I could be a possibility.
Does anybody else have any additional board business?
Yeah. It's Michelle, and I have a question about the calendar. If potentially we are told that the schools are not going to reopen for this school year, I think it would be in the best interest to reach out and do just a quick poll turnaround from parents. Would they want additional time off around Memorial Day, if we're still abiding by social distancing and are unable to use that time to do anything but typically stay at home, or would they prefer to take those 3 days and get it off the end of the school year and sort of end it sooner than later? So I think it's something that we have to kind of consider all stakeholders and what would be beneficial for everyone if we know that school may not be in session, which may not be the case, that we may be going back. And if that's the case, then it's a different scenario.
Okay, why don't we come up with scenarios, or best, we could, I don't know how quickly we can do a survey, but folks can certainly weigh in and send us an email. There's also this thought, Michelle, that people just need a break. I mean, my 5 days of working a week are exhausting by Friday, and you're a teacher, so you probably know better than anybody. Is that break that mentally that you're expecting, for a longer weekend, more beneficial, socially and emotionally? I don't know the answer, but I know as a teacher, 5 days in front of a classroom is a long, exhausting task now.
No, I agree, but I think, it's two different scenarios. Either end it earlier or take a break in the middle. I don't know. I'm not saying one way or the other.
Okay. Well, why don't you all, if you have strong feelings one way or the other, shoot me an email and we can bring it up at May 11th and make a decision then. Does anybody else have any additional items they want to bring up? New, old, words of wisdom?
This is not really a big item, but I just want to thank Connor Henderson for putting together this teleconference. I think it's going well, and I know he puts a lot of work into this stuff and into taking care of the technology at every meeting. So thank you, Connor, and that's all I have to say.
Hey, Sal, thank you for saying that.
Great.
Connor also
Thank you,
managed
Connor.
to get an episode of The Pulse produced this past week while we've been on break. And Connor is on our A team of folks who are still aiming to make our Chatham TEDx event happen this year in a virtual format. So we've been meeting and working on that, and we got a green light from our health department official to be able to record one student at a time in our auditorium with 2 other adults stationed 50 feet apart from one another, wearing masks. But we're trying to, this is a teaser, we're trying to pull off that event because it was such a great community experience, and we have students lined up who have worked hard all year on creating talks that they think are worth sharing with others. So Connor's been instrumental there, on top of producing TV shows with high school students at this time.
Thank you, Sal. Thanks, Mike.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Connor. I do not see any additional public commentary. I checked the Board of Ed email again. There's nothing that's come through. So if there's nothing else from the board, I just want to again thank our administration and our teachers and our parents. Again, I know the teachers did not sign up for this type of learning, and we really appreciate you hanging in there with us. So thank you again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope you all stay well, and I make a motion to close the public meeting, and there is no executive session. So stay well. Thank you, everybody.
You guys
Thank you.
be careful.